Another podcast episode means another Monday being made more interesting. So that means you are tuning into another episode for season 2 of Make Mondays Interesting. I'm your host, Denzel Gaga. This is a God-given talent production, and we are brought to you, as always, by Pamelia Accountants, financial solutions for you and your family. Now, if you're watching the video version, I'm sorry, listeners that just listen to the audio version, but if you're watching the video version, you'd see that we are in a completely new setup. We are still in the same office space, just in a different room of the office, because today I don't have a guest with me. I am all on my own. So yeah, but it's going to be interesting. Don't tune off, because I have got something prepped, which I'm super excited for. Now, I encourage you, share this episode of Make Mondays Interesting, and really just share all the episodes. And if you're ever in a conversation with someone that's asking, hey, I want to listen to a really good podcast, tell them about this podcast. Now, the best way I can describe this podcast, the genre would be entrepreneurship, business, dreaming, and everything else that kind of comes into that category. I would say that's the genre of the podcast. Now, usually, like I said, I do have guests. And so full disclaimer, I am not a business expert, which is why I primarily prefer to interview guests, because they are the business experts. And I just ask them questions about their business experience. So you probably get a lot more out of them, but don't worry, I did a lot of research for this particular episode, and have a lot written down. Again, disclaimer, this is purely my opinions, but opinions backed up with a lot of references or better information than I can provide. So it's not just opinions, but we have a few good references to make sense. Anyway, I'm going to move past this intro and get really into the crux of what we're talking about. So the topic today, inspiring employees to want to work. And I know that the title of the video suggests that I'll be making references to one of my favorite TV shows currently, The Office US. Specifically Steve Carell's character, Michael Scott. And you might be asking, why are you talking about a TV show? Well, it's the Make Mondays Interesting podcast. The key word is interesting. So I want to use interesting, fun analogies to convey my point. So I will be making references, probably not through the entire episode, but stick to the very end and it'll all tie in. So allow me to set up what I'm going to be talking about. And a lot of what I'm talking about is based on this book that the video people can see. And for the audio people, it's called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. Now, Simon Sinek is one of my favorite inspirational speakers. So he's written a few other books, not just this one. I haven't read any of these other books, but if you've heard of Simon Sinek, he'd be more well known for something called what he calls the Golden Circle Theory. Now, there's a TED Talk of him talking about it on YouTube, which I encourage you to find, search it up. And that theory, that Golden Circle Theory, this is why I fell in love with him, is such a profound theory. Now, the theory of the Golden Circle, every time I come up with a new business plan, I use that Golden Circle Theory to begin my business plan before I even think about all the practical side of things, like how am I going to make money about it. So very good, intelligent man. And the general synopsis of this book, The Infinite Game, let me just read it out. Now, this is not from the back. I actually wrote how I would summarize the book. So there are infinite games and there are infinite games. For example, chess is a finite. No, did I say infinite twice? Let me start again. There are finite games. Make Mondays interesting. Anything can happen. And there are infinite games. For example, chess is a finite game. The rules are fixed. There's a clear objective on how to win. And at some point, the game will come to an end. And this book is called The Infinite Game. So, an infinite game never comes to an end. An infinite game has no fixed rules, and an infinite game has no winners. Now, you might be wondering, what board game is this Simon fella talking about, Denzel? He's not talking about a board game. He's talking about life. More specifically, business, because he does do a lot of motivational speaking towards business leaders. So, in other words, in what I just shared with the synopsis of the book, you can't win life, neither can you win business. There's no prize for building the biggest organization nor accumulating the most money. Ironically, to win the game of life, board game, you have to get to the very end of life. You know the board game I'm talking about, the end of life or the end of the path or the end of the board, you know what I mean, with the most life tiles. So considering that game has been around longer than I've been alive, it has created this culture of us applying the objective of a board game called life to actual life. Hope I haven't lost you yet. Before I even go into this book, I want to just talk about two scriptures that I believe. Now, he doesn't reference these scriptures in the book, but I do believe that they best give it a bit more legitimacy, you could say, to what he's saying. So Ecclesiastes 1 verse 11, a scripture in the Bible written by King Solomon, regarded as one of the wisest persons to have ever lived, says, "We don't remember what happened in the past and in future generations." Hang on, let me start again. We don't remember what happened in the past. And in future generations, no one will ever remember what we are doing now. Ooh, interesting. So another scripture in that same book, so chapter 2, verse 16. "For the wise and the foolish both die. The wise will not be remembered any longer than the fool. In the days to come, both will be forgotten." So in other words, when you die, people aren't going to be talking about how much money you accumulated or the vast amount of money that you accumulated, nor they're going to be talking about how many businesses that you successfully ran, nor will they be talking about how many properties you managed. Truth is, all that you may have built up will be forgotten. So, now, as depressing as that scripture may come across, the author, King Solomon, is not intending for us to be like, okay, then there's no point to life and just give up completely. He's intending for us to have a perspective change. Now, that perspective change is this: life isn't about winning, which, like I said, is spoken about in this book. And now you can argue that there are certain people throughout history that we continue to talk about, like a best example, Martin Luther King Jr. But I defend my views in saying a man like MLK is still remembered not because he accumulated vast amounts of materialistic things, or he wasn't some rich person or had so much property or did all these materialistic achievements. He is remembered for the values that he so strongly believed in, and the ideal future he envisioned. In other words, and the reason why we still talk about him to this very day is he left a legacy. So, now that I've just shared a bit more that's not referenced in the book, but going back to this book, The Infinite Game, Simon urges the importance of having an infinite mindset, especially when it comes to the world of business. And the benefit of an infinite mindset, longevity. So yes, I'd argue that someone like Martin Luther King had an infinite mindset because he wasn't focused on accumulating things that would become meaningless after his death. He was focused more on leaving a legacy, about pursuing something greater than himself, which is why we still talk about him. The longevity in his life is lasting long after his life, in schools, in history classes. So, yeah. So thinking about that, thinking about what's said in Ecclesiastes, and we're thinking about longevity, this infinite mindset, I'm sure that having an infinite mindset in the world of business means your business would be remembered a lot longer. And not because you were a successful business, but the legacy that you left or the change that you brought to this world. So, all right, I'm going to stop talking and just really talk about the book again. I keep saying I'm going to talk about the book and then I go off topic. So Simon shares 5 principles in equipping an organization for a long and healthy life. The first one, and the one that I'll be talking about today, and the one that drives the following 4. So really it starts with 1 and it kind of has a loop. That's the illustration used in the book. Is just cause. Now, not just cause I'm doing business just cause. No, just cause. Like just as in righteous, cause as in something, like a cause. What best describe a cause? Yeah, for the cause. That's what I mean. That's a just cause. So Simon writes, and let me open the book for it. Simon writes, a just cause is a specific vision of a future state that does not yet exist. A future state so appealing that people are willing to make sacrifices in order to help advance toward that vision. Now let me say it again. A just cause is a specific vision of a future state that does not yet exist. A future state so appealing that people are willing to make sacrifices in order to help advance toward that vision. Going back to the MLK reference, Martin Luther had a dream. A dream that he actually didn't get to see come to life in his lifetime. Yet people are still making sacrifices to make happen with the whole civil rights movement. So, that's the impact Martin Luther King had because he had a just cause. In the business sense, because most of the people that listen to this podcast are business people or aspiring business people. And I'd ask this. Do you have a just cause that the people you employ are willing to make sacrifices for? Sacrifices like voluntarily working unpaid overtime hours. Now, you can't force people to do that, but if they're voluntarily doing that, I would class that as a sacrifice. So, and look, that's not the only sacrifice. There's other sacrifices spoken about in the book. That's just one example. And yeah, reading the book, it's titled The Infinite Game, but the book puts a lot of emphasis on the concept of a just cause. A just cause is what gives us that infinite mindset. And so reading this book, and I'm glad I'm reading this book, it's convinced me that Simon the author has convinced me that it is a just cause that inspires employees to want to work. And so when I was pitching this idea or coming up with the concept of what I wanted to talk about today in this episode, my mother, who's professionally known as Michelle, asked me this question because we're obviously we're in a pandemic. What about if employees are working from home? Well, that's a normal thing right now. What if employees are working from home? She asked me that question. And I'll argue this, because even though this book was written in 2019 and wasn't considering that would be going into a pandemic the following year, he kind of briefly touches on, the importance of a just cause. And what I can best interpret, or the best way I can answer that question that my mother asked me is, if it's a legitimate just cause, the employee wouldn't need to be in an office to be motivated to work. They wouldn't need to have the boss behind their back watching their every move. Because as I mentioned before, a just cause means people are willing to make sacrifices for. And so one of those sacrifices of working from home is not giving in to the temptation of playing Xbox during work hours. So to answer the question of the work from home, if it's a legitimate just cause, if the employer is like, I'm actually building towards something greater than myself, I'm not just working for the sake of earning income to pay my rent and pay my other bills. It's like, no, I'm working for something greater. Then I'm sure you don't need to be over their shoulders watching their every move to see if they're working or not, because they want to work simply because of a just cause. So if you have a good just cause and you've got staff working from home, I would say trust your staff. So in Simon's words, to explain what a just cause is, so a just cause must be for something. In other words, affirmative and optimistic. A just cause must be inclusive, open to all those who would like to contribute. A just cause must be service orientated for the primary benefit of others. So not self-serving, my own interests, primary benefit for others. Selflessness, you could say. Just cause must be resilient, able to endure political, technological, and cultural change. And because this book was written before last year, I'd also argue resilient, able to endure COVID-19. Resilient. And a just cause must be idealistic, big, bold, and ultimately unachievable. So that's what he describes as what a just cause is when writing it. Now, do companies have a just cause on their website? Not really, but it's easier to find mission statements on company websites, because that seems to be the new trend that a lot of businesses do, is having a mission statement, which I agree is very important. Is every mission statement reflective of a good just cause? No. But yeah, well, no, not really. So I must also stress that the book talks about that a just cause isn't a mission statement. It's two separate things. However, a mission statement in a way does reflect what the just cause would be. So like I said, because there's no just cause on people's websites, I'm going to simply interpret companies' just cause. So I found two great examples. I'll also share one poor example, but let's talk about the good ones first. So I'm going to interpret what their just cause, like I said. The first one I want to share about is Google. Now, Google's mission statement is this. I like this one. To organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. It's a good one. So in other words, the just cause, the thing that they're making sacrifices for, their employees making sacrifices for, is they envision this world where anyone and everyone can have easy access to the world's information. Hence the Google search. And yes, all of us would probably agree that, or you could probably argue or say that Google has achieved that. You know, the whole just Google it is a mainstream phrase that we all talk about it. No one says just Bing it, or no one says whatever the other search engines there are. No one ever says just Bing it. Just Google it. It's become a mainstream phrase that we use. So you would argue that then they've done it. They've created that world where information is easily accessible with a click, with an easy search. In less than a second, you can get like thousands upon thousands of search results for whatever you're asking. And so you could argue, yeah, then they've done it. They've achieved it. Well, actually, Google is still infinite-minded. They're not like, okay, we've done it and we're going to sit back and relax. It's like, no, they're continuing to innovate. That's part of having an infinite mindset. And so an infinite mindset is a just cause is not something that's a finite goal that you just achieve. And once you get to that ideal future, you just sit back and relax. It's like, well, the future will always be far ahead of us. So they're thinking infinitely, that which creates innovation. And so the best example I can give to you about how Google is still innovating is this. Well, Google is in the process or in the middle of coming up with a self-driving car. And so this is how I'm just thinking. I don't know how true this is, but this is how I'm assuming that they're envisioning this future. So keep the mission statement in mind to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. How does a self-driving car come into play? Well, once they've collected all the information about every single road in the entire world and every place of every business, every restaurant, then the passenger of that self-driving car literally just has to say, once they get into the driver's passenger seat, because there won't be a driver's seat, the passenger seat, and be like, hey, Google, take me to, for example, Pamelia Accountants, the office space. The car is going to take them to this office space because this office space is on Google Maps. The roads know how to get there. They're trying to, so this is where the useful part comes in. Their version of of how this information becomes useful is that in a way we just become really lazy and we get driven to the places we want to go. That's the future they're envisioning, is just all this information accessible, not just for us to research, but for us to be driven places. So, and then still not finished they're still working on this concept of a self-driving car because they're continuing to innovate, because they're infinite minded and they have this just cause, this future that they envision. And you could say, yeah, they haven't gotten there yet. It may look like they're close to it, but in their minds, they're nowhere near close to the world they envision. And this is very controversial, but as big as Google is, I don't know if we want to be in a world that they envision. Ooh, hopefully I don't get cancelled for that. Another one, and this one's my favorite one. It's Spotify's mission statement. And theirs is to unlock the potential of human creativity by giving 1 million creative artists the opportunity to live off their art, and billions of fans the opportunity to enjoy and be inspired by it. I love that one. And I can testify that Spotify for sure works with this mission statement in mind. And why I say I testify is because the platform that I use to distribute this podcast, Anchor.fm, is owned by Spotify. And so they've given me the opportunity to live off this show through monetization, of course. And well, in saying that, we're going to have a quick break. What a transition. And we're back from a short break. If you're listening to the audio version, most likely you would have been given an ad break. Watching the YouTube version, well, I'm technically not monetized, so it wasn't really much of an ad break, but the audio people would be more appreciative of what the break was like. So, I'm saying random things. Excuse me. Before the break, I shared 2 great examples of mission statements and interpreted what I believe their just cause would be. And that was Google and Spotify. Now I want to share with you a poor example. But before I do, I want to give you a quote. And with that quote in mind, we'll read the mission statement. So I found this article on this site called Leading Teams Australia. And in this article, there's a particular quote. Oh, by the way, the title of this article is Australian Organisations' Mission Statements Fail to Inspire Their Staff. So that's the title of the article. And there's a quote from a bloke named Ray McLean. He's the founding director of Leading Teams Australia. And he says this: many organisations create a mission statement without much thought given to how the values in the statement relate to the organisation's everyday performance. Without clarity around their purpose, employees can struggle to buy into their organisation's culture. There you go. So with that in mind, I'll read it again because we'll make sure that's in our minds as we read the mission statement for this business. So many organizations create a mission statement without much thought given to how the values in the statement relate to the organization's everyday performance. Without clarity about their purpose, employees can struggle to buy into their organization's culture. Now I want to read the mission statement for LJ Hooker. Now remember, keep that quote from Ray McLean in mind when I read this. We are pushing boundaries, connecting, sharing, learning, creating, and doing whatever it takes to be the best in real estate with our customers at the center of everything we do. Because I've read this book, The Infinite Game. LJ Hooker's mission statement is very much a finite statement. Not an infinite statement, a finite statement. And as we kind of established earlier, a finite statement or finite mindset won't take you far. So literally, their just cause, which really isn't much of a just cause, is to simply win. That is not a just cause. That is not something greater than yourselves. That is just a self-serving to win. Because there's always a good feeling when it comes to winning. And like I said, as we've discussed, it's not going to take you far if you're only thinking about winning. So yeah, it's not much of a just cause. Because I'll say this, the whole being the best and winning, what do you measure that on? Because their versions of the, most likely when you say to be the best or to win, when that becomes your goal in life or your just cause, it's very much a monetary value or a very materialistic way to measure winning. That's usually what comes with when people say to be the best, to win. So, interesting. But you could argue, if you live in Australia, you would know that LJ Hooker is a nationally recognized brand. There's a lot of them, a lot of their offices are here on the Gold Coast. So you could argue then we don't need a just cause to have employee buy-in because they're obviously a successful company. That might look like that on the surface, because I beg to differ that claim about not needing a just cause. I did some research, and this is what I found. They have a rating of 1.7 stars out of 5 on productreview.com.au. Below not average, below the medium, below, well, say average is 2.5. That's below that, all right? It's not below average. But they have a poor rating. Let's just say that. They have a poor rating of 1.7 stars out of 5. You can research this yourself. Go to productreview.com.au and literally search up LJ Hooker. 1.7 out of 5. So 511 of the 637 reviews are 1 stars. A lot of them saying literally this: bad customer service. So tell me, is that employee buy-in? Is that good employee buy-in, I should say? Are they the best? Their numbers might say that they're the best. They might make the most sales. But according to their reviews, that doesn't sound like being the best. Because I would argue that they're more focused on making money, making sales. So let's put it this way. If LJ Hooker, hopefully they don't come after me. If LJ Hooker was to have a more of an minded approach when coming up with their just cause and mission statement, so not just about winning, an infinite one, because you can't win life, you can't win business, as we already established, I'd be confident that they would be the best in real estate. But that's, in the sense that they might be actually they might instead get reviews like great customer service if their focus wasn't about being the best in most sales, but they just focused on creating, I don't want to use the word the best, just creating an experience. Maybe you could say, okay, this is what we could adjust cause for LJ Hooker. Would be something along the lines, now I'm coming up with this in my head right now, something along the lines of, if their just cause was to envision a future where people have confidence in selling their home. That's an easy just cause to live by. And really, if you're going to have bad customers, like part of being confident in selling your home, the real estate agent is going to need to have great customer service for the people to have confidence in the ability to sell their home. So that is how I would redo their just cause. Let's just reread their mission statement again. So the mission statement prioritizes being the best. Actually, let me just read it again. We are pushing boundaries, connecting, sharing, learning, creating, and doing whatever it takes, blah, 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 to be the best in real estate with our customers at the center of everything we do. So the mission statement literally prioritizes being the best over customers at the center of everything they do. And Simon actually says this in the book. Word order literally is everything. If people came before their own efforts of, sharing, learning, creating, if literally the sentence was rearranged to have the customer at the front, like customers at the center of everything you do, and therefore we're sharing and learning, blah, 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 I'm sure they would have better reviews. I'm just basing it off what I believe in. Again, these are all opinions. I'm not a business expert. So, but because it's arranged the way it is, so it's prioritizing being the best, I'd say this. Well, this really means if that's what they're prioritizing, their employees, their salespeople, are more focused on making a sale and putting money into their own pockets. So they're focused more on their self-interest. They're not, service orientated. That's the word. They're not service orientated. They're not doing it for the benefit of others. So they're just thinking about themselves. They're more focused on that. They're more focused on themselves than whether the customer was happy or not about the sale. They're just focused about the money being made. That is what a just cause, or that is what a finite-minded approach or being the best or this desire to always win creates, is employees not caring and employees only caring about themselves, which won't look good on the product review side with bad customer service. So I would say this. I wrote this little paragraph down. So when your focus is simply about being the best, and someone talks about this in chapter 8 of his book, you end up cutting corners. And L.J. Hooker's sake, not caring enough about the customer for the sake of achieving finite goals. They didn't care about the customer. They only cared about putting money in their own pockets. So let me go back to the Leading Teams Australia article, because it also talked about some other things, and I want to share about that also. So what was also talked about is the factors that contribute to create a positive work environment. So according to a survey commissioned by Leading Teams, 63% said, so they interviewed about 500 people in small and big companies. So 63% said that a collaborative environment makes for a positive work environment. And so, okay, that's interesting. A collaborative work environment makes for a positive work environment. Which it's interesting because not all work environments are set up for collaboration. They can be set up for collaboration, but because they're finite-minded led companies, they're not set up for collaboration. And I'd say, the ones guilty, the environment's guilty of this are very much retail environments. And what I mean by that is, I remember working for a Christmas casual in retail. I won't say the company's name. I worked for them, and it was always about KPIs. And it wasn't about, I'm going to help you I'm going to help you help me make this sale or something. It wasn't this collaborative of let's get these shoes off. I just revealed it as a shoe company by saying shoes. Let's get these products off the shelf. Let's get these shoes off the shelf. It was never this collaborative environment. It was very much a self-centered, where each employee was in it for themselves. So yeah. Okay, this is how you know you're in a finite environment. Retail is one of them. Some other environments are like it too, is that, when the emphasis is on individuals' KPIs and not working towards something greater than themselves. We are more so focused on just making our sales look better than the next. And look, the environment, I didn't enjoy that environment. I didn't find that to be a positive work environment. It did feel like a very much a hostile environment, because people were there to sabotage each other in regards to, I might have convinced this customer to purchase this product. And so when I go take them up to the counter, someone who's just sitting around the counter will be like, oh, I'll process it, putting it under their code, putting the sale under their name to sabotage my KPIs for their KPIs. So when there's not a collaborative work environment, and in this instant, it's a very finite, they're not working towards something greater. So there's zero just cause. It creates this, a hostile environment where we're sabotaging each other for the sake of building up our own sales. And kind of how humans work, how we're wired. Humans are actually wired for relationships. And so we're always desiring to connect with other humans. And environments like that, when it's finite and it's always about just not for something greater than themselves, i.e. not having a just cause, and it's not collaborative, because when there's a just cause, an environment therefore becomes collaborative. You're working towards something great together. When there's no just cause, you're just working there for yourselves. So when you don't have any of that, it actually creates, like I said, a hostile work environment, and employees don't enjoy wanting to be there. Therefore, they're not really inspired to work, or not inspired to make the sacrifices needed to advance something greater than themselves. And because we always, like I said, humans desire to be connected. So if we feel rejected by other humans because of because of sabotaging and things of that nature, it's not enjoyable. So therefore we retreat. We don't like that. It's not a positive work environment. Man, that took a long time to just explain that one point, but hopefully I'm making sense. A just cause creates a collaborative work environment. Now, kind of shifting gears, but not really, because I want to give an example of a collaborative work environment. And is this example a real example? No, it's a fictional example, because yes, I said I'd reference The Office, and now I'm about to reference The Office. Thank you for waiting this long to hear my office rant. So, yep, the US sitcom The Office. I promised I'd talk about it. So, I wrote this down. The reason Steve Carell's character, Michael Scott, the regional manager of Dunder Mifflin Scranton branch, is a great example of being an effective business leader is because his focus is people. Classic one. That's a classic saying. People over profits. Literally, his focus is people. So, episode 12 of season 5. And yes, I do believe it's just for plot's sake. It is revealed that the branch Michael manages is the best performing branch when compared to all the others. And when he gets asked by the CFO, what's your techniques? For comedic sake, of course, Michael just doesn't know how to explain himself and doesn't know why he's the manager of the best performing branch. But as me, the viewer, I can understand why it is the best performing branch. And it's because, like I said, his focus is people, is that he's not putting this, he's not expecting his employees to meet KPIs. There's none of that. He's just like, he's creating this warm, friendly environment because that's just his personality, which then becomes why they're the best performing branch. So, in other words, Michael cares about his employees and the fact that they have jobs. He wants to make sure that they have jobs. And that shows, it's like an example in episode 7 of season 3. So when the branch faces a potential closure, Michael goes out of his way to show up at the home of the Dunder Mifflin CEO to guarantee that their branch remains open and everyone keeps their jobs. He was focused on the people. You can't just expect these people to find new jobs. It's like he went out of his way to make sure that they kept their jobs. There's another example, but for time's sake, I'll just completely skip that and just talk about and share 2 quotes from Michael Scott that best describe his management style. And I won't give context as to what was being said or what the context of those episodes. I'll just read the quotes. So this is his management style. This is a quote from him. People will never be replaced by machines. In the end, life and business are about human connections. He recognizes the importance of people over machines, of course, in the context of that episode or that quote. Importance is business. Life and business are about human connections. There you go. Another quote is, at least we care enough about our employees that we are willing to fight for them. Those 2 quotes say a lot about his management style. Now, if you watch that show, you can be like, because it's a comedy show, a lot of just random ridiculousness just happens each and every episode. And you can wonder, like, so how are they the best performing branch? How do they get work done in an office space like that? Well, it is a comedy. And you could say, you could argue, yes, for plot's sake, they just become the best performing branch. But watching all the episodes and really understanding Michael's character, or Steve Carell's character, I should say, and this is what I would say, why they're the best performing branch. They are, especially the manager, Michael Scott, are not concerned with finite goals of making X amount of sales each day. There is zero emphasis on finite goals of making X amount of sales if you watch that show. And then, therefore, they become the best performing branch, conveniently, which is true. for most companies. They become the best at something when it's not about finite, just making money. So I'll say this. I'll come to the end. There's no direct mention of a just cause or even a mission statement in the show. It's made obvious that Michael's overheads, known as corporate in the show, are focused on finite goals of making sales, of moving product, which actually costs them their job. Like the CEO, the CFO, all get completely fired from their jobs, but the Scranton branch stays alive conveniently. So they lose all their jobs. And I'd argue that Scranton branch isn't like corporate. They do have a just cause. So Scranton branch does have a just cause. And you just have to guess what it is from watching the episodes. Best clue I can give, best interpretation of what their just cause is, and this is a clue given in episode 9 of season 4. Episode is called Local Ad. They're trying to create a local TV ad for their company. And so the future they envision, limitless paper, because they're a paper sales company, and a paperless world, because paper has the capability to spread an idea, connect us with the world, share news, good or bad, and give us second chances. And look, it's not a great interpretation of what their just cause could be, but it's an interpretation nonetheless. And it's actually not about winning. Their just cause is not about winning, which is why they become the most successful branch. So again, this is a fictional workplace, so give me grace for trying to guess it, what their just cause is. But really, in summary of what I'm trying to say is that if the emphasis is all about money and making money and winning and accumulating all these businesses, that's a very finite-minded way of thinking of things, and it's a very self-centered way of thinking for things. So really, in summary, if we are to inspire employees to buy in other words, if we're inspiring employees to want to work, then we can't be focused on money. We therefore have to be focused on something greater than ourselves, something that we can never achieve, because that's what a just cause is, unachievable. And yet, a just cause, focusing on a just cause. A just cause. I just said it a third time for emphasis. Because that is what encourages people to want to work. It's like, I'm not just here to pay my bills. I'm here to make an impact on the world. That is what a just cause does. It's bringing an impact in the world. So if you're watching this, you're a business owner or you're an aspiring business owner, I encourage you, it's not too late to figure out what your just cause is. Just think about it. You might already have a just cause, but you just haven't written it down on paper yet. And you may not have realized it. You may be someone who's already not thinking about money. You're just thinking about helping people. That might be your just cause. It's a very broad just cause, so make it more specific to the industry that you're tailoring. And like, for example, hopefully I'm allowed to say this, and I've got to get approval, make sure I don't get bleeped out or this gets cut out. But the just cause for Pamelia Accountants, what I would believe is, we say financial solutions for you and your family. The just cause is, well, we want to see a future where there's all these healthy and thriving families. Part of what makes a thriving family is, a strong financial foundation. Healthy, thriving families. It's got nothing to do with making monies or having the most clients or being the best accountancy firm. It's literally just, we want to see healthy, thriving families. That's an example of a just cause and how we've applied it here at Pamelia Accountants. I'll just say this. You can learn a lot about leadership styles in the office. So I encourage you, if you're like me and you ever just want to be distracted with some comedy, watch The Office. But don't just watch it for comedy's sake. Actually just pick a part of understand the character of Michael Scott and the way he leads, because the way he leads actually ends up creating this best performing branch. And in season 6, it even goes a step further, where the fact that the company they work for is bought out and they're the only branch and the only employees that remain because they were different compared to the other ones. So watch The Office. Also, read this book. Read this book and watch The Office, because this book gave me more of an appreciation for The Office as well. So read this book, The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, because I am doing not the best justice of explaining what is written in this book. Simon is such an intelligent man, inspirational speaker. If you can't get your hands on a copy of this book, watch his YouTube videos, listen to any of his podcasts, and learn more about this concept of a just cause, of infinite mindset. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's episode of Make Mondays Interesting. I did a lot of rambling about a whole lot of different things, but the main point is have a just cause. And that is how you get employees to be inspired to want to work. So, yeah. I encourage you, like this episode, share this episode, do whatever to engage with us, comment on the YouTube video, because the more that you engage, the more people we can reach, and the more people we can reach means we can make their Mondays more interesting. So to sign off, I am your host, Denzel Gaga. You've been listening to the Make Mondays Interesting podcast, and I'll see you next week for another episode. And yes, I'll be joined by a guest. So yeah, thank you. And yeah, do whatever I said in this podcast. Don't ignore my advice. Peace out.